Hi everyone, just a quick reminder that if you want to follow along the journey of making this dress in real time with me, both on Instagram and YouTube, then please consider supporting me on Patreon. You get to choose how much to pledge per month, and you will receive live updates both on my close friends' Instagram stories and access to all of the YouTube videos right now. Hope you enjoy the video. It's now July the 18th, and a couple of days ago I just received the horsehair crinoline stuff in the mail, so that means this weekend I can actually finish the skirt and finish off the hem. So that is what I am planning on doing, and what I've got here is Enchanted Rose costumes on YouTube, and this is the video that I am following to figure out how I'm going to actually face the hem of the skirt and finish it off. So I've watched that video. If you skip towards the end of it where she's going through how she finished off the hem of the skirt, that's the part where I took notes, and I've taken my notes onto my little booklet as I usually do, and basically she cut 5-inch wide strips of broadcloth, cotton broadcloth fabric. I don't have enough broadcloth, so I'm probably just going to use the polypoplin fabric left over, and I'm not sure if the strip that I have is 5 inches wide. I think it's a bit smaller. I'm hoping it will work, but we'll see. I have to go check. Basically, you pin it to the right side of the skirt, and then so pin right sides together, and then you just stitch along there, and then just next to that stitch line you sew down the horsehair crinoline stuff, so that's the crisscross drawing part there, and then to attach the loose ends of the horsehair crinoline she just zigzag stitched them together. Then you turn it so that you've got the right side of the skirt and then the right side of the facing, like that, and then you not understitch. Yes, I think it's understitch. Yeah, you do some understitching along the facing, and that will stop the facing from peeking out to the right side of the skirt. And then finally on the inside of the skirt, so this is the wrong side of the skirt, so the inside, you just whip stitch the facing down using hand stitches and only catching the interlining of the fabric, so you don't go all the way to the right side of the fabric. So that is my plan. I am going to drink my cup of tea and then I will get to work on this. So here's the horsehair crinoline stuff. I've actually never used this stuff before, so we'll see how it goes. And I have no idea how many meters are in here, but it was cheaper to buy it bulk like this for like $25 rather than by the meter. And I'm not sure how wide it is. I think it's 5 centimeters if I recall correctly. And over here I've got all of my salvaged scrap pieces. I've got bits of the cotton broadcloth, the polypoplin fabric, which is the main bulk of this, and I'm hoping that this will be enough width-wise, looks like it will be, to use as the facing for the hem of the skirt. And I'm not sure how many meters of this I've actually got. I'd say it's the same amount as when I was cutting out the ruffles for the train ruffle. So I think that was like 30 meters or something, but this doesn't feel like 30 meters, so I'm not sure how much is in here. I'm just hoping it's enough to cover the circumference of the skirt. I've got the skirt over here. It's been sitting here for a long time, and I think the first thing to do would be to cut off the excess fabric and cut the shape of the skirt hem that I want, and this would include cutting off the excess broadcloth material so it meets the edge of the satin fabric. So I will need to go ahead and do that for across the whole hem of the skirt, and then after I've done that, then I think I can start working on adding the facing to the hem of the skirt. Oh, one more thing. This is cut on the straight grain. It's not on the bias like what Enchanted Rose Costumes had done. And I'm hoping that won't affect things too much, but we'll see how I go. I think what will end up happening is that there might be some pleats in this fabric as I need it to fit the curve along the bottom of the skirt. Yeah, just because it's not cut on the bias. But I hope that won't be too much of a problem. So I've just finished cutting off the excess cotton broadcloth and I'm left with this sort of shape. Now I'm not very happy with how these parts sort of protrude outwards, so I'm thinking of like shaving off a little bit here and then just using that offcut as a template for that side to make it somewhat symmetrical. The other thing that I need to do is chop off the front of the skirt because this is actually longer than the sides. So I'm going to measure whatever the shortest length on the side is. So I think it's until that point there, and then make sure that that's consistent all the way around the front of the skirt, and then that way I will be able to walk. Yeah, so I'm going to shave off that part and also trim off the front to make it all even and nice. So I've just gone ahead and marked where I want the front hemline to be, and if you're curious, I measured from the waist down to 46 inches and then marked with pins at the 46-inch mark, and that is in line with the side front seam, which is the shortest panel on the skirt, so I had to do it against that. In here I think this is quite short as well, but I'm hoping that I don't want to cut it to that length of shortness because that's too short. So the skirt is just going to be a little bit short at the sides, but I'm hoping that with all the skirt fullness it will be disguised and also there will be the netting overlay over the top, so that won't be very obvious. But yeah, now what I'm going to do is just chop off the front of the skirt, and then I can move on to the facing for the hem of the skirt. Also, quick note, when I was doing the back of the skirt, like cutting out along the edge, I put in those, what are they called? Clips. I put in the clips, and that's just because I cut off the basting stitching that was holding the broadcloth layer and the satin layers together, so the clips are basically just serving as that. And I also trimmed off a bit more around the back there, which I didn't film, but it was a very small sliver just to make it a bit of a nicer, smoother shape. And yeah, so I'll trim off the rest of the bottom of the skirt and then let's start on the facing. I've just trimmed off the front edge of the skirt and I'm coming around these side pieces now, and I need to trim off that fluff from the cotton broadcloth layer underneath. But something that I've realized is that now that the skirt has been assembled and the original basting stitches, they're not actually lining up like the satin and broadcloth layers perfectly, like now that it's had a lot of time to just drape. So I found that there's a lot of like, I don't know what to call this, but like a bit of a bulge, like puffiness at the bottom where the original basting stitching is, and I don't particularly like that. So I think, and the same thing has like repeated down here as well, like there's a bit of that puffiness towards the bottom edge where the basting stitching is. For the front edge, I actually chopped off all of the basting stitches because they were at the very edge, and I needed to chop off that length. But now you can see that the satin layer is in line with the cotton broadcloth layer underneath, and that is more the effect that I want. So I'm thinking of taking out the basting stitches all across here or just chopping them off. So if chopping them off means that I'm losing length, then I won't chop them off. But if they are in the zone where it's too long anyway, then I'm cool to just chop that off. And I'll probably put in some more pins or clips to hold those satin and broadcloth layers together. But I just want to remove this puffiness a bit more. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do across the whole hem of the skirt. And then after that, hopefully we can move on to the facing. Okay, so the front is done. So I trimmed off all of the basting stitches and then put pins in place to keep the satin and broadcloth layers together. And I think the front is all good in terms of being leveled out. Now I'm going to go ahead and redo the back. So I'm actually going to take out all of these clips because they're causing some of the bulging that I was talking about earlier. So it's not really visible on here, but especially here you can see that there's so much bulging because the satin layer, there's just, I don't know, it just doesn't flow nicely. So I'm going to take out the basting stitches, take out the clips, and then do my best to smooth out the train satin layer and then pin all the layers together. And I'm hoping I have enough pins because this train is huge. I've done my best to smooth out the train as best I possibly could. You can see the excess satin fabric overlapping over here. I'm going to chop that off and then I'm going to move on to the facing. Yeah, I've had enough of dealing with this. And I guess it's not perfect, but I'm happy with it. So yeah, that's the side view. here's the front, which you've seen before, and here's the other side. So all I did was just trim off a bit more, just to make sure that these edges were nice and smooth, especially where the seams were. So you can see all my little offcuts there, but I really wanted this to be a nice smooth straight line all the way to the back. I'll trim that off, and yeah, so that's how it's looking so far. Anyway, I'm going to take the excess satin off, and we can move on to the facing. Okay, so I've just laid out my offcuts from when I was making the train ruffle, and I've just laid that all around just to make sure that I do have enough length, and I think I do. That looks like I do, but if I do need any more length, I could just add this and extend it, and that's just a shorter piece. Anyway, I'm now going to pin this to the skirt, right sides together, and yeah, that's it. And then I'll move on to the next step. Hem has been pinned with the facing all along the bottom edge of the skirt, and this is how much I've got left over of the facing, and I'm just going to sew that shut once I've sewn all around the rest of the skirt. So yeah, it's all pinned, so it's time to take it to the sewing machine. I've finished sewing all of the facing on. As you can see, there's a whole lot of skirt hem there. Next up, I am going to sew in the horsehair crinoline braid. That's what it's called. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to sew this to the seam allowance like that. And I'm just going to sew on the seam allowance, but quite close still to the existing seam there. The other thing that I was thinking of doing, and I think I might actually do this, is when sewing the horsehair braid, I'm going to sandwich it in between the satin and the polypoplin fabric that I used for the facing, like that, because that way, when I do turn the facing to the inside, there is just that bit more, there's just a one extra layer of fabric in there to help protect the horsehair braid from, like, I guess, working its way through the polypoplin fabric, because the polypoplin fabric is very lightweight, not very durable. So that's just on the edge there to help with that. So it would have 2 layers of polypoplin fabric protecting that very outer edge of the skirt. So that's hopefully how it's going to look from the outside when I'm done. But yeah, I'm just going to insert the horsehair braid in between the seam allowance like that, and then sew all along that line. The other thing I am not sure about is whether or not to stretch the horsehair braid when I get to the curvy areas like the train. In Enchanted Rose Costumes video, she said not to stretch this, and then there is like a string on hers at the top where she pulls on that string, and that gathers this up a bit more to help curve around those edges. But I don't have any string in my horsehair braid. So I'm just thinking that if there is a really curved area, this would need to, basically this would need to stretch in order for this side to curve, if that makes sense. So I'm thinking when I do get to the train section, I might pull on it while I sew it in, just to help get that curve into the horsehair braid, but I am really not sure. But here you can see what happens when you pull on it to the horsehair braid. So it forms more of a curved shape. So I'm not sure exactly what I should do, or if I should just leave that edge, not stretch it, and then when it comes to working this edge into the curved shape, I just pull on it upwards and try and work it that way. I might do that. That seems like the more that sounds like the better solution, because Enchanted Rose Costumes said specifically not to stretch as you sew it. So I will follow her advice, and let's hope that this works out how I want it to. So I've just finished sewing in the horsehair crinoline braid, as you can see, and I just zigzag stitched the two ends together. Sort of screwed up these parts, but oh well. I was trying to be close to my existing stitching line, but I ended up just doing it more towards the middle of the seam allowance. The next thing I'm going to do, and I don't know if I'll do this now because it's late, or if I'll do it tomorrow, but it's to bring the facing to this side and then understitch or top stitch, or however you want to call it, along here, and then that will basically keep the facing from peeking to the right side, so it will keep it to the underside. That's why it's called understitching. Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do that right now, because this already took forever as it is. So yeah, I think I might call it a night, and I will see you tomorrow to hopefully finish this skirt. We will see. Sorry if you can hear a bit of background noise, but I have decided to just pop on here and explain what I am doing. So last night I finished sewing in the crinoline horsehair braid, which is under there, as you can see, and then I also went ahead and did understitching just along the facing edge, and that's to keep everything towards the lining side of the skirt, and so it doesn't peek out to the right side. And now what I am doing is I've taken the whole skirt to the ironing board, and I am basically just ironing down along that edge. So this part has already been done, and I've just got the clips in place to hold that in the position that I want it to. But you can see further down here in the part where I have not yet ironed it, there is no crisp, clean edge for the hem of the skirt, so that's why I am ironing all of this down. So the way I'm doing this is literally bringing the fabric like that, and then having like a very slight slither of the pink satin showing through at the top, and then that way I know that there is no facing on the right side of the fabric. So if I just zoom in on what I've done here, you can see that there is a very slight slither of the pink satin along the top edge, and this is how the skirt hem would look from the right side, hopefully. As for the horsehair braid, I made a rookie error and I don't have the little thread strings on top which you can pull to curve the horsehair braid to the shape that you want. So note for next time is to buy the horsehair braid that has the thread loops in, but that's okay. What I've done, and I just did like a very small section just where the pins are, what I did was I threaded some thread all along through the top edge of the horsehair braid, and then I just pulled on that thread. So here you can see that's where the thread finishes, and I pull on that thread to curve it to the shape that I want. And I've just put the pins in there temporarily just to see if that worked, and I think that did, so that's probably what I'm going to continue doing. So I'm just going to iron down the whole hem and put clips in to help with maintaining the integrity of the hem edge, and then I will probably have to do this same process of threading the top edge of the horsehair crinoline so I can easily curve it to the shape of my skirt. And I probably only need to do this for the train portion of the skirt, really, because that's the most curved part of the skirt. Around towards the front of the skirt, I think it's fine if the horsehair braid is just as is. So yeah, that's what we're dealing with, and I'm really, really, really hoping that I can get the skirt, like the base skirt, done today, by the end of today. We'll see how I go, but there is a lot of hand sewing involved, so I probably won't get that part done, but I think if I can get all of the non-hand sewing stuff done, that would be awesome. So this is what I mean by I need to put in the thread along the curved edge. So this is the train portion of the skirt. That's the center back, but this is still that curved back portion. And you can see that the edge is very curved to the point where this horsehair braid just does not want to cooperate. So it's along this edge especially, and then obviously across the center back panel, and then the other side, that I will need to put in the thread and then pull on the thread to curve it to the shape that I want. As for ironing this down, the other thing is, because I cut the facing on the straight grain, so it's not actually on the bias, it won't form nicely to the curved shape of the train. So when I go ahead and iron this, I'm just going to try and mush it down in the curved shape, and if that means weird puckering or pleats or gathers in the facing fabric, then I am fine with that. So yeah, I just thought I would explain this whole situation. Oh my gosh, that was actually so much easier than I expected it to be. So I just, like I said, smushed down with the iron on top of the facing, but I don't think I need to do any sort of running stitches through the top of the horsehair braid to conform it to the curved shape, because I think the iron did exactly that. It's lying completely flat on the curved edge, and then from the outside it looks perfect. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm so pleased with that. That's awesome. So I'm just going to continue doing that across the whole hem, and I don't think I need to do any sort of gathering stitches or anything. I can literally just smoosh everything down with the iron and it should be fine. Fingers crossed. Okay, so finally the whole thing has been ironed. The next thing I'm thinking of doing is actually folding under this raw edge of the facing, like that, and then ironing that down, just so I have everything in place for when I need to hand sew this. So yeah, I'm just going to run across the whole thing again with the iron, but this time it should be a lot quicker because I'm not wrestling with the horsehair crinoline, because it's all nice and flat, which is great. So it took a lot longer than expected to turn over the raw edge and pin all of it down, but it is finally all done, as you can see, just lying on the ground. And what I'm going to do, and this will probably be each night for the rest of the week, is do tiny hand stitches all along the inside edge of the skirt, and that will be to attach the facing to the interlining of the skirt. So I'm going to do tiny whip stitches, or there's another stitch, I don't know what it's called, but it's like a crisscross, and I've done that before on other dresses and it's worked well. So maybe the crisscross stitch. And what I'm going to do is make sure that I don't go through to the outside satin fabric, so it's only going to catch the cotton broadcloth layer of the skirt. So yeah, that is the plan for the next week. Oh, it's Sunday by the way, at the moment, and that is all I've done today. It took me about 4 hours to just do ironing and pinning. Oh, and there's the train over there, the train ruffle, I should say. And I still haven't done any tacking stitches on the train ruffle yet. I probably should get around to doing that someday, but I have a feeling that I probably never will.